I'm Melanie Norton. This is American Gothic. Here we fucking go.
Today, we're going to ask a serious question. Is God real? That, of course, depends on who you ask and where they're at in their life's journey. But up front, the simple answer is yes. The real question should be, is God a real presence in your life? I'm going to tell you a story. It's one of the most beautiful stories and testimonies to come from the most unlikely source, Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's, of course, known for his controversies and his flat approach to psychology. See, Dr. Peterson was never a spiritual person. As an intellect, he relies on his own understanding to deal with life on life's terms. But something happened to him, something that humbled him to his core, something he couldn't intellectualize his way out of. A series of health issues plagued him, and he became addicted to prescription medications, just like so many people in the world. He couldn't, on his own will, combat this monkey on his back. He needed help. Ultimately, he did combat the issue, and to my knowledge, has been recovered ever since. But what happened is it stirred up something in him because later on, he did an entire series on examining the Bible. He approached it from a scholastic and intellectual perspective, but he analyzed every single verse. He collaborated with others and provided a very in-depth analysis. When he was done, he confessed he had no choice but to believe in God and in Jesus Christ.
Sometimes the objective world and the narrative world touch. That's Jungian synchronicity. And I've seen that many times in my own life. And so in some sense, I believe it's undeniable. We have a narrative sense of the world. For me, that's been the world of morality. That's the world that tells us how to act. It's real. Like, we treat it like it's real. It's not the objective world. But the narrative and the objective world touch. And the ultimate example of that, in principle, is supposed to be Christ. But I don't know that seems to me oddly plausible.
Yeah.
But I still don't know what to make of it. Partly because it's too terrifying a reality to fully believe. I don't even know what would happen to you if you fully believed it.
If you believed in the story of Christ, or if you believed that history and let's say the narrative meet,
both, I think you, because when you believe that, you buy both those stories. You believe that the narrative and the objective can actually touch.
So who is he? Who is God? To answer that, we have to establish what God is. He is the creator of the universe, the beginning and the end, the omniscient, all-powerful being that established mankind in his. God is an acronym. Good, orderly direction. God is not an idea or an abstract concept. He is a being made of energy and light. He has a soul and specific characteristics. He's like that friend you have that kind of behaves differently depending on who they're with. Because of this, people see him in different ways. And in that, they will say things like, well, my God does this, and my God does that. But there is no my God. No one owns him. No one has better access to him than anyone else. Many people describe him differently and see different characteristics. Usually that's based on culture, family tradition, and sometimes it's based on trauma and resentment. So he's something different to everyone. And therefore, everyone has a different perspective on who he is. This is why there are so many religions, and even more so, why there are so many sects of Christianity. But in essence, he is our Father in every sense of the word. A father creates a child out of his own body and out of his own image. The father loves the child and wants what's best for him in every possible way. But the father knows he can't control the child, and that the child will grow up to be their own person, with their own experiences and thoughts and ideas. Sometimes it angers the father, sometimes it makes the father sad, but the love is unconditional. So who is God? He is our Father, and we are his children. How do I know this for sure? Because it's in our DNA. So if God's real and he's a being with a soul, where is he? Is he here on earth? Is he sitting on a throne in heaven? The answer is he's everywhere, and he's inside each and every one of us. This is a scientific fact. It's called the God gene. It was proposed originally by geneticist Gene Hammer, who suggested we have a predisposition to God through our DNA. That a specific gene called VMAT2 may be linked to a person's inclination towards spirituality. But that was just the beginning. Since then, scientists have taken it a step further. They've continued this study, and what they've found is nothing short of miraculous.
That if you were to look into the sequence of your DNA, you would literally find the name of God written out. You see, there's a rate of connection between the deoxyribonucleic acid as follows: 10, 5, 6, 5. And in Hebrew, 10 is equivalent to Y, 5 is equivalent to H, 6 is equivalent to V. This sequence is the foundation to every single one of our cells. When you translate it from Hebrew to English, you'll get Yahweh. What would you
cell of every form of life? Carbon-based DNA, the introduction is the same. And the first translation literally reads, literal, God eternal within the body. God eternal within the body. And God that is depicted in the DNA is actually spelled the way that the name of God was spelled in the ancient text before it was removed 6,800 times. Now, here's the beauty. I just have to say this.
All right.
My first fear was I found it in the Hebrew language. And I said, does that mean, could it actually be divisive if it only is found in one language? And when the research went to its fruition, what we found is it is in Hebrew and Aramaic and Sanskrit, in every cell of every form of life.
Pointing to God as our creator. Throughout history, humans have battled to prove the existence of God, but what if it was inside of us all along? In recent years, the discovery of the structure of the DNA molecule provided further evidence for the design argument. The DNA molecule carries specific genetic information that takes the form of a 4-character digital code. This code holds a signature of numbers that is repeated within our DNA, showing God's signature. Dr. Rubenstein explains that there are 2 polynucleotide helixes in our DNA, held together by a bridge of sulfur that bridges the DNA base pairs in a sequence of 10, 5, 6, and 5. In Hebrew, 10, 5, 6, and 5 spells out Yahweh, the name of God. This information supports the Apostle Paul's statement in his letter to the Roman Church that God's invisible qualities are clearly seen through what has been made. Our
You know, if people ask all the time, if there really is a God, why does he allow so much pain and evil in the world? Well, you see, when God created man, he did so with a condition and a promise, and that's free will. That we would be the drivers of our own destiny. See, I believe that what God really wants more than anything is our love. But He doesn't want it forced. He wants it genuine and sincere. So He gave us free will. We have the choice and the power to decide if we're going to be a force for good or a force for evil. Did you know that Satan, Lucifer, was originally an angel? As a matter of fact, he was the most beautiful and beloved of all the angels. But he started thinking he was maybe too good to be just another angel. His ego overtook him and he wanted more power. So he led a rebellion against God. After the rebellion in heaven, Lucifer and his minions were tossed out and sent to earth, banished from heaven for all time and eternity. That spirit of evil is on earth today. We all see it. It's in the news every single day. And we see it when we're out in public, when we watch the way people treat one another. The spiritual war continues. God allows evil because He wants to know the true hearts of man. He wants to know if we are sincerely loving and respectful and loyal to Him.
Video.
God didn't create Satan. Satan is a byproduct of free will. You know who God created? He created Lucifer. Perfect, it says in Ezekiel and in Isaiah, in all his ways. He created Lucifer to worship and to be perfect. But Lucifer rejected Jesus, rejected God, and became Satan. Are you guys following me here? So the question is not, why would God, a loving God, create an evil devil, a hateful being like Satan? Understand? Evil is not something that God created. It is a byproduct of the absence of God's will.
One of the most difficult questions to answer is this. Why does God allow innocent people to die or get cancer or suffer, especially young children? The reason it's so hard to answer this question is because the people asking the question are usually in a stage of grief that is unbearable. Trying to provide a rational answer to a person engulfed in the most painful moment of their lives, it's tricky. It can seem insensitive or diminishing, and no one wants to do that. So I think it's really important that we share this answer with the people around us regularly so that they already are prepared when that tragic moment occurs. The answer is this. Each and every being that ever comes to earth has their own journey and purpose while they are here. Sometimes they are here for a long time. Sometimes they are here for a short time. But they make an impact on humanity simply through their presence. How can I explain this? People come in and out of our lives for so many reasons. But we struggle so deeply when they leave our lives in a permanent way. This is often because we forget that it was about their journey and not our own. This is particularly hard when someone loses a parent that they feel like maybe they still needed them. Or worse, when someone loses a child that hasn't had a chance to grow up. Of course we feel pain and loss and fear. This is natural. It's important to walk through these emotions and face them directly, rather than letting them fester silently. But to answer the question at hand, and I will keep it short, it's not about us. It's about that person's journey, not our own. So we look to the impact on our own lives and make specific decisions because of it. From God's perspective, it can be concluded from passages in the Bible that there are three main reasons we suffer. Our suffering has a purpose. It allows for human and spiritual growth. Our suffering leads us to hope and redemption. And it's an opportunity for God to display His glory. For example, I would reference the Charlie Kirk Memorial. That event was nothing short of miraculous. And the number of people who came together, both in person and online, to celebrate God was a sign of His glory. To anyone who asks, if there is a God, why does He let children die? Why does God let people get cancer? To them I say this. And I say it as someone who has experienced incredible loss. That person's purpose for being present on this earth was completed. I believe God sends angels and I believe God sends people into our lives to effect change. When they have completed their mission, they get to go home. Okay, so one of the coolest and most beautiful miracles you will ever witness is when an intellectual finds God. I mean, it means they have taken their own knowledge to the very limit and had to humbly admit they were not able to conclude any other hypothesis other than a living God. Being humbled, by the way, is not the same thing as being humiliated. It actually takes a great amount of courage and strength to acknowledge your own deficiencies, especially when you're regarded as high IQ or genius. Now, we all as a population know so much more today than we did centuries ago that the idea of God, it's almost just too obvious. We haven't just had personal experiences. We've had scientific evidence and historical accounts of a spiritual reality. It just can't be denied. Not even by the most elect of the intellectual community.
When you start to study and understand brain development, as I did, or neuroplasticity, or dopamine, you have to, meaning I don't care if you're an atheist, agnostic, or believer in creator, you have to step back and just go, wow, wow. Now, then of course there's this difference among scientists as to who believes in God, who doesn't. I'll just go on record. I'm very comfortable saying it. I believe in God. I do. I think there are many things that science can explain. There are certain things science can't explain. But I'll even go a step further, which is that all the elements of science are entirely compatible with the idea of there being a God. And I'm not the first scientist to say this. I mean, Einstein believed in God. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists ever, clearly believed in God. There are
So, what is it that separates us from God? The short answer is sin. The deep answer is living in our own will instead of His. There are many circumstances and things that separate us from God, but most of them are easily identifiable and curable. See, what separates us from God are things we put above Him. Our idolizing of other beings, our obsessions with material world, and things that aren't of a spiritual nature. This actually includes what we put into our body. You see, 90% of the things we consume today are not natural and actually are not designed for a pure body. I don't just mean drugs and alcohol. I mean the types of food we consume. If there is a channel to God, because we have the God DNA, it's within us. Every time we put harmful things into our bodies, it becomes a barrier to that channel. It's like a blockage in your gut. In order to have a pure connection with God, we need to have a clean channel. For instance, are you familiar with fasting? This is why fasting works and why people do it. It's to clear that line of communication, to cut out all the static and the noise. I've said this a lot. A lot of times when I pray, I feel like I'm getting voicemail. But usually when we pray, and I don't mean like a designated daily prayer, but usually when we pray, it's because we're in the midst of some chaos. And there's probably some, sin and impurities going on. So what I try to do, and listen, okay, not the one to preach on this. I try to keep that channel open. I try to put good, healthy things into my body. I'm not 100% perfect at this. It's a learning process, and I'm learning. But I do know that by doing these things, you do feel a better connection. So God is real, and you're looking to find Him. First, you have to be open to the idea that He's actually there. Then you have to seek Him out. Pray. Okay? Seek God in everything you do, but pray. Now, when I say seek God in everything you do, I mean find little moments throughout the day where you can see God's hand in something. Look at the content that you're putting into your brain. Make sure at least on a regular basis you're watching things of a spiritual nature. You are watching things that bring you closer to God. And I don't mean like, cheesy religious movies from the 80s. That's not what I'm talking about. There are plenty of wonderful resources online, and there are plenty of new movies, by the way, which are phenomenal, that directly and indirectly bring you into God's orbit. If you want to discover God for yourself, if you want to have a personal relationship with God, you have to make a conscious effort. It's not just going to happen because He gave us free will. We have to seek Him out. And how do you pray? Listen, okay? There's a million ways to pray. If you don't know what to say, that's fine. There are churches that provide, set prayers like the Lord's Prayer. That's a great place to start. Okay? But for me, because I like to have a personal relationship with God, I don't want to come across as fake or phony. I want to just be myself. So when I pray, I talk to God like He's my best friend. Like he's my confidant. Like he's the person that I go to whether I'm really, really happy or really, really sad. And I just speak naturally. And that's kind of what works for me. But I think the reason it works for me is because it does establish a genuine relationship. I'm not sitting there rehearsing or chanting something that somebody else meant a long time ago. See, in my opinion, a prayer is a declared intention. So if I'm just rehearsing what somebody else said, I'm declaring their intention. And then some could argue, well, if God is omniscient, he already knows what you want, so why do you have to tell him? It's like saying, like, you know, my children know that I love them. Why do I have to tell them? Because it's nice to hear. It's nice to have the conversation. It's nice to, you know, bond in a weird sort of way with somebody you can't see. But I promise you this. You can feel it. I can. When I'm genuinely communing with God and talking about things that I probably would never tell another human, I can feel the comfort that I'm looking for. I can feel his presence. And it's amazing.
Can know God exists. And the paradox is in part, you can't know God. And so can you know that something exists that you can't understand? And the answer is, well, maybe that's why you only see God's back in some real sense, right? You get hints. And maybe you get hints if you open yourself up in the right way. And one of the ways you open yourself up in the right way is not to ask for what you want in the God is a celestial butler manner, but to ask how it is that you could transform yourself so that you could be a better agent of the divine will or something like that.
And then what do you find when you do that? When you embrace responsibility, what you find is meaning, which is a route to the divine.
Well, the secularists would say, well, without God, you can still find meaning in service to others. And I would say, yes, that's true. But the reason you find meaning in the service to others is because that's one step on the ladder to the divine. Well, Nietzsche said God is dead, and what's going to happen? Nihilism? There's a paradox in the notion of whether we
So, like I was saying before, a prayer is a declared intention or desire. Now, I could get into this whole thing about how manifesting is nothing more than intense prayer, but I'll save that for another time. Okay? God's will doesn't always match our desires. And sometimes we don't consider the butterfly effect of our life and the choices we make. But God knows. He knows how one simple action can change the trajectory of someone else's life completely. God usually has bigger plans for us anyway. He has bigger plans than we can even conceive of, because our minute imaginations cannot compete with his. Don't believe me? Look at the Grand Canyon. Simply put, he might have bigger plans. Also, sometimes our prayers get answered at the wrong time or long after we had the intent or desire to begin with. See, God's timing does not match ours. He is infinite, so his clock is also infinite. We as humans on earth are linear with an end point. A topic for another day, really, but super quick, I have a theory. If you look at the picture, see how our linear timing runs through God's infinite timing? There are 3 points of intersection. Okay, the beginning is birth, the end is death. But in the middle, I don't wonder if that's not like what we would call deja vu or the Mandela effect. I can't prove it because I'm not a genius. But, I mean, maybe someone like Neil deGrasse or even Terrence Howard could figure this out. But just imagine that the linear line is constantly moving forward and the infinite line is constantly spinning. If that were true, that would allow for several instances of intersection. This weird thought. Thought I'd throw it out there. Garth Brooks has a song, Unanswered Prayers. I don't know what his story is these days, but back in the day, I was a huge fan. Some of his songs still bring a tear to my eye when I hear them. One of those is Unanswered Prayers. This song sums up so many times I didn't get my way, or I would get upset that my wishes weren't fulfilled. And years later, I was like, whew, thank God, dodged a bullet. Listen to the lyrics. It goes like this. Sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. Remember when you're talking to the man upstairs. Just because he doesn't answer doesn't mean he don't care. Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. So there's a guy, Bill W. He co-founded Alcoholics Anonymous and co-wrote the Big Book along with Dr. Bob. AA is recognized around the world as an effective treatment plan for both alcoholics and drug addicts. But that's because there are principles within the program, and I believe these principles would be just as effective on non-alcoholics who simply want to progress as people and evolve spiritually. One of the key components to the program is to admit you are powerless and that you need to find a power source greater than yourself to help you overcome this spiritual malady. Which again, I think there's a lot of humans suffering from a spiritual malady these days. But there's a chapter within the Big Book called We Agnostics. And in the chapter is one little paragraph that I think challenges the question of, is God real, in a manner that gets to the very heart of the issue. Here's the line. It goes like this. Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our own human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end of all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? So who am I? Who are any of us to say there isn't a God? Our own concepts and intellectual boundaries are limited to our own experience. We can't even comprehend that which is out of our grasp. We live in a world where people believe in the impossible all the time and the ridiculous. But somehow, the notion that we aren't the masters of the universe is too far a reach? Really? When you can set your ego down and look into your own human inadequacy, you find that the idea of God is not just possible, but it's preferred. If we are really in charge of everything, we're in a lot of trouble. I do believe in God because God has shown himself to me on many occasions through miraculous events I can't even explain in human terms. There have been many times throughout my life I knew that God's hand was on me because left up to me, I would have destroyed everything. And I'm not special. There are so many accounts and eyewitnesses of situations unexplainable outside the intervention of God. So, in my opinion, Bill W. nailed it when he said, rather vain of us, wasn't it?